All right, this is our breaking news story this evening. Just moments ago, we started to receive the news, of course, of that statement, essentially reading that we are seeing the effectiveness of the cabinet or the president wanting to pursue the effectiveness of the cabinet by making a few changes to the national executive. I'm going to read from the statement that we received just moments ago. Mamoloko Kubayi, currently the Minister of Human Settlements, is now appointed the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. That post previously held by Minister Thembi, who is now going to be appointed Minister of Human Settlements. So really, what we see there is a swapping of those two posts by Kubayi as well as Nkadimeng, and then some changes in the spaces of deputy ministers as well. Phumzile Mgcina appointed the Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. Mgcina has been serving in the National Executive as the Deputy Minister of Labour and Employment, and Judith Nemadzinga Chabalala appointed the Deputy Minister of Employment and Labour, who has been serving in the National Executive as the Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. But some real questions around what it is that brought about this reshuffle of the cabinet, and a big focus of that, of course, going to be on Thembi Nkadimeng, who you know has been facing quite a bit of a debacle and legal challenges, as well as questions around if at all she had a role to play in money, a loan that she is said to have taken linked to the VBS Bank. But let's hear now from Professor Dirk Kotzé, who is, of course, with Unisa, a political analyst. Prof, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this news hitting us just moments ago. Are you at all surprised? Was this going to happen at some point?
Good evening. Yes, I think this is really quite a big surprise. As you indicated, there's lots of discussion already about Minister Nkadimeng and her future. There's lots of pressure, or has been lots of pressure on President Ramaphosa to remove her from the position as any of the ministers, but our Minister of Justice specifically, because she is in the process also responsible for the National Prosecuting Authority that must investigate her. So I think as a way of explaining the swap that has taken place is that he's not removing her from the National Executive or dismissing her, therefore, completely, but taking her away from the sensitive position, and a position which is most possibly, one can say, is in a conflict of interest situation, because she's the Minister of Justice and there's possibly going to be investigations by the criminal justice sector against her about the VBS and other related matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost difficult to avoid the focus on now we can say, I suppose, outgoing Justice Minister Thembi Simelane, especially when you see the spread that's been put together by the Daily Mavericks, Paulie van Wyk, as well as Kyle Cowan, who's been looking at just the movement of VBS monies and the involvement, or alleged involvement, if at all, of the Justice Minister, or now I must say outgoing Justice Minister. And something that where in this article they've gone as far as to really unpack just how unaffordable a lifestyle it was that she was living. Would it have been better for the president to simply remove her?
I think this is the logical step that most people expected or wished that he should do. But for reasons that he will have to explain to us at some point, he didn't do it. As I said, I think that the step that he took now is to say now she's not anymore in the firing line or directly in the firing line, or that she can be accused that she will try to block any form of investigation against her and possible charges against her. So that component has now been removed. I think what is, however, something which is for President Ramaphosa counting a lot is that she's from a province which is close to his heart. It's the province where the ANC did very well. She's a former mayor of Polokwane, and I think that counts still in favor of her or protects her, and instead of being removed from the cabinet completely. So I think this is not the end of the situation. I'm quite sure that the pressure on President Ramaphosa will not stop. and that it will continue the quest by civil society, the media, and others, and the opposition that she must be removed completely from the national cabinet.
And then there's the appointing of Mamoloko Kubayi as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, a massive responsibility, this, Prof. Is she the right person for the job in your view? Any concerns there?
I'm not aware that she is specifically a person with a legal background. She has been in several portfolios now in the cabinet already. I think she's being treated by President Ramaphosa as someone who can fit into different portfolios, but she doesn't have a very specific specialization or expertise in the field of justice. She is not, as far as I know, a lawyer. And also not someone who deals specifically with constitutional matters. So I think in this case, she's more of a person who does the management of the ministry, but she's not necessarily going to provide the direct leadership in terms of taking the lead as an expert in the field. She's rather going to play the role of the political executive or the political manager of this portfolio of justice.
I mean, this is at a critical time, of course, but let's talk a little bit about the deputy ministerial posts there that have also been changed around. You've got Phumzile Mgcina, appointed Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. What do you think the President was intending to do there? Is it to strengthen this ministry that is facing questions all round, especially as the focus becomes on what's happening, for instance, in Stilfontein?
Yes, I also thought about Stilfontein as a possible explanation for this because it affects both of these portfolios, very much minerals and petroleum resources. Minister Gwede has not been very prominent in this respect. The Minister of Police has been much more assertive and prominent and taking the initiative or taking the lead in it. And I think this is a matter which requires a lot more of a participation and guidance or leadership actually by the Ministry of Minerals and Petroleum Resources. So I guess this is a way in which President Ramaphosa tries to strengthen that portfolio and give extra capacity for the minister in order to become more directly involved in this situation. The labor and employment, this is obviously is actually an indirect component because it involves labor matters. It involves the mine workers, although they are not necessarily organized labor. They are not belonging to trade unions. But the labor component is certainly relevant for this. And I think as this situation is going to develop, the role of trade unions in relation to what some would call the artisan miners or informal miners, or some would call it illegal miners, it will become a more prominent issue. So I think this is possibly more in anticipation of how this situation is going to unfold, that President Ramaphosa changed it and again added a new deputy minister in order to give more capacity for that.
Yeah, because essentially, even where, as we see with the ministerial posts, where human settlements in the Ministry of Justice is concerned, you're also seeing a swapping of deputy ministers for minerals and petroleum resources, as well as employment and labor. So I'm wondering, perhaps out of curiosity, if that is, lessons learned within each ministry and how they can be then implemented into the next one. So is this an opportunity then to deal with issues like illegal mining?
I guess that is the logic of this, yes. Yeah. We don't, as the public, don't see much of deputy ministers, so we don't know always what exactly are their responsibilities. The role of deputy ministers are that the ministers are supposed to give them an explanation of their responsibilities in writing at the beginning of their term. So in this case, these deputy ministers will have specific tasks within the ministry and the department that they will take responsibility for. Mm. So we will hopefully see over time exactly what they are responsible for within these two portfolios.
Yeah. And just lastly, is this, just your final thoughts here, a decisive move by the President?
Sorry, I didn't
Would
hear
you describe this as a decisive move by the president?
I don't think it is. I think this is an interim arrangement, especially in the case of Minister Nkadimeng or Simelane. I don't think this is the final move in her case. I think there's some developments in future will still be in the pipeline.
All right, let's leave it there. Prof, an absolute pleasure speaking to you, political analyst there who's with Unisa's Department of Political Sciences, Professor Dirk Kotzé.